get into your head a wee bit. His name is Leo Glaister.
A woman from Spain once woke up in a different life than the one she went to sleep in. The night before, she had been a few months into a new relationship after breaking up with her boyfriend. She woke up in bed next to her ex. They were still together. She went to her wardrobe and found clothes she had never bought. The weekly shop in her kitchen cabinets was unfamiliar. She called to check up on her sister after a recent shoulder surgery. She had no memory of it. Neither did her family, nor was there any evidence of her ever having had any problems with her shoulder at all. She was the same age, had the same passport and identification, the same job, and many of the same friends. Everyone she knows remembers her exactly as she is now. She is the only person who remembers her other life, and she is concerned that she may be insane. She is not. She is perfectly lucid. What has happened to this woman is that she has simply been transferred, in some way, from one path to another. I'm sure you're familiar with the metaphor of crossroads in our lives, that every moment is a type of fork in our path, which we move down through our decisions one way or the other. Do you ever think about all of the people who you might have fallen in love with if only you had taken a different way home, or stood a little longer in the bread aisle at the supermarket? All of the people who might have been an integral part of your life, but instead you will never know them. The unimaginable impact of even our most mundane choices on our lives is staggering. Think of how many times you might have died if you had made different choices. Maybe you would be homeless now, or famous, or rich. Sometimes the impact of our choices can be so overwhelming that it is difficult to choose anything at all. You find yourself afraid that today will be the day that I make the choice that changes everything. But what many people fail to realize is that the fact that by taking one path on our crossroads, the other forks do not simply cease to be. Every possible outcome of every conceivable action or non-action that has ever happened or will ever happen exists now. But I should explain. This will be the first part of a three-part lecture series on the techniques, technologies, and consequences of inter-universal travel, sponsored by Doubtful Science Incorporated, a friendly research company dedicated to uncovering, commodifying, and monetizing the truth about parallel universes. I don't know if any of you have ever traveled to a parallel universe, but it's quite an experience. If you ever get a chance, I really can't recommend it enough. But before we begin in earnest, perhaps a little context would be useful. To begin, we must travel back to the early part of the 20th century, specifically the part of the 20th century inhabited by one of the greatest minds of his generation, Mr. Bertrand Russell. Russell once theorized that a statement, in order to be true, must have a structural isomorphism with the state of affairs in the world that makes it true. For example, the cat is on the mat is true if, and only if, there is in the world a cat and a mat, and the cat is related to the mat by virtue of being on it. If any of these three pieces, the cat, the mat, or the relationship between them that corresponds respectively to the subject, object, and verb of the sentence, is missing, then the statement must be false. This idea has been precipitated and generally accepted for generations until the arrival of a certain young woman who changed the way we see reality. Martha Ventures was 15 years old when she developed the theorem that each decision we make has not one of many, but several simultaneous consequences, each playing out on its own separate path. Through 17 years of consistent study and experimentation at the expense of all else in her life, she was able to prove that in truth, if there is in the world not a cat, or a mat, or if there is a cat but no mat, or if there is both a cat and a mat, but the mat is on the cat, or if the cat is in a different room altogether, it does not mean that the statement "the cat is on the mat" is false, merely that the truth of the statement is located elsewhere. There is always a cat on a mat. So why am I here? Well, one day soon, Doubtful Science Incorporated, led by their CEO and Chief of Development, Dr. Martha Ventores, hope to release to the public the technology to allow people to actually explore their own parallel universes. In just a few short years, you could be able to view, at any given moment, every version of your life, not only as it happens, but in advance. Their vision is a world where our pathways are laid out before us, where chance, uncertainty, and chaos are eradicated from existence. It is this vision that I have come here to present to you tonight. Part 1 of our lecture is entitled Experiences of Transition, and comprises first-hand accounts of the physical sensation of travelling between realities, harvested from a number of willing human participants in a recent trial conducted by Doubtful Science Incorporated of an experimental device which allows the user to transplant oneself temporarily into a parallel universe. A great number of people graciously consented to this experiment. However, the accounts I will relay this evening were taken from those who not only survived, but remained entirely lucid throughout and following the journey. Experiences of Transition commences thus. It feels like pulling yourself apart at the cheeks, and then having your skeleton, animated by periodic surges of electricity, step from one half of your body into the other. Personally, I don't think that's a very good description. It was like having my hair cut with a cheese grater, as the hollow teeth ground down to my skull, and I found that my skin and my skull, and everything below it, was all made of hair, and the blades tugged as the barber planed his hand through me, and the strands of me stretched and broke into fluttering breaths that collapsed and gathered on the floor to be swept into the next room. You can make of that what you will. You get a feeling in your stomach like you just remembered you left the oven on in every house you've ever lived in, every day of your life. Imagine having your left eye replaced by a hazard light and your right eye turned fully inwards to watch as the flashing danger orange of your own organs pulsing against the inside of your skull. I think that was from a different experiment, actually. It felt like being beaten to death by a doppelganger of yourself, constructed from a lifetime's worth of the sludge dug out from underneath your fingernails. It was better than sex. If sex was being pushed through an industrial waste disposal unit by the person you thought you would grow up to be when you were 12 years old, while staring an acoustic cover of Crawling by Linkin Park sung in Korean, and Jake Bugg performing a thrash metal guitar solo cover of Anyone Else But You by the Molten Peaches into your right ear. Only worse. These are just a few of the myriad accounts we collected during the first stages of the experiment, and give, I think, quite a well-rounded description of how it feels to transcend the restrictions of a single reality. But, exciting as it is, the technology is really only one small part of Doubtful Science's experiment, the seedling from which the mighty oak of discovery can grow and spread its ever-expanding limbs. We will explore more about the science and art of parallel universal travel in part 2 of our lecture series a little later in the evening. For now, thank you for listening, and please enjoy the event.